I got home at 9:23 on a Thursday evening in November, and the first thing I noticed was that my front door was unlocked. I stood in the hallway for a moment. A wet jacket hung on the hook beside mine. Dark olive, a woman's cut still dripping onto the mat. The smell of rain and something faintly floral moved through the apartment. I set down my bag and walked down the short hall. I opened the bedroom door. On my bed, on top of the gray duvet I had left folded, that a woman was asleep. Her hair was damp and dark against the pillow. Outside the window, the lights of Victoria Harbor blurred and scattered through the rain. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. She opened her eyes and looked up at me without flinching, and in a voice still rough with sleep, she said, "Lucas, can I stay?" I stepped back and pulled the door almost closed. "Go back to sleep," I said. "We'll talk in the morning." I walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and picked up my phone for the first time since I had left my desk at 6. 4 missed calls, 3 text messages, all from a number I didn't recognize. It was Zoe. She had tried to reach me before she came over. "My name is Lucas Dempsey. I'm 36 years old. I work remotely as a software developer for a logistics company based in Vancouver, and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in James Bay, a quiet neighborhood at the southern tip of British Columbia. The apartment has a small balcony that faces the Olympic Mountains on a clear day. Most days it doesn't. 3 years ago, I divorced Amber Whitfield after 5 years of marriage. No children. I'll say the same thing I've told most people: we wanted different things. The fuller version is that in our last year together, I found out she had been seeing someone else for at least 8 months, a colleague from her marketing firm in Vancouver. I didn't drag it out. I signed the papers, found the James Bay apartment, and moved in the following spring. Zoe is Amber's cousin on her mother's side. She's 31. She does freelance graphic design and photography, mostly for small local businesses and independent publications. Through 5 years of my marriage, she was the quiet one at every family gathering, the person refilling the water pitcher while everyone else was loud over dinner, the one who noticed when someone's glass was empty. She remembered things. At a backyard barbecue in the summer of 2021, I mentioned offhand that I hated driving through downtown on Sundays but because of the farmers market traffic. 2 weeks later, she mentioned very casually that there was a free parking lot on Moss Street that most people didn't bother with. She had drawn me a little map on a piece of paper, the route, the lot, a small arrow. I folded it up and kept it without quite knowing why. After Amber and I separated, Zoe was one of the people who helped with the move. She showed up on a Saturday morning in May with boxes and a bag of groceries and stayed until everything was sorted. Then the family closed ranks the way families do, and I didn't hear from any of them for almost 2 years. At 7 the next morning, I was making coffee when she appeared in the doorway. She had folded the duvet and left it on the chair. She spoke first. "I'm sorry about last night, Lucas. I know I had no right to come in like that. If you want me to leave right now, I will." She set 2 things on the counter, the spare key I kept in a small dish by the door, and her phone, open to a string of missed calls beginning at 4:30 the previous afternoon. "I remembered where you kept it," she said. "From moving day, I'm sorry." Then she told me the surface story. She had broken off her engagement to Derek Anand 6 weeks earlier, a tech entrepreneur she had been with for almost 2 years, based in Edmonton. He had been unfaithful for at least half that time. When she ended it, he didn't accept it. He had contacts across the BC and Alberta tech community, knew most of the people she worked with, and made it clear without saying it directly that her professional life was not separate from her personal life. She had stayed with her friend Priya in Vancouver for 10 days. Then Derek showed up at her parents' house in Kelowna. A week after that, Priya called to say a stranger had phoned her brother asking where Zoe was staying. She understood then that Derek had hired someone. She withdrew $4,500 in cash from her personal account, turned off her main phone, bought a prepaid, and deleted her social media. She drove west to the coast, took the BC ferries crossing to Swartz Bay, and kept going south until she was in Victoria. "Your address wasn't anywhere Derek would have it," she said. "You weren't in my contacts on my main phone. You weren't connected to anyone in our shared circle." She looked at her coffee. "I know that's not a good enough reason." I listened. Something underneath the surface of the explanation didn't quite sit right. She could have gone to any motel in Victoria. There were dozens. She had driven 4 hours and taken a ferry to come here specifically. I didn't push her on it. Stay through the weekend, I said. You sleep in the back room. I'll stay in the main bedroom. That afternoon I was looking for a spare charger in my desk drawer, and I found the folded piece of paper. The map. She had drawn it in blue pen, neat and unhurried, with small careful labels. Free lot here, turn at the light, Moss Street Market on Saturdays. In the bottom corner, in handwriting smaller than the rest, hope this helps. I looked up. Zoe was at the kitchen table with her laptop, and her eyes moved away from me just slightly faster than they needed to. Neither of us said a word about it. On the second morning, a Sunday, she made breakfast, eggs with dill and aged cheddar, the way my mother had made them on weekend mornings when I was growing up in Sudbury. I had mentioned it once at a Thanksgiving dinner at Amber's parents' house, one of those offhand things you say when someone asks what food reminds you of home. That was 4 years ago. She asked about the project I was working on. I told her we were migrating a client's data infrastructure across regions, and the timeline was tighter than the client understood. She listened to the whole answer. She asked whether the latency issues were on the client's end or ours. She asked the kinds of follow-up questions that only someone actually listening can ask. That afternoon I told her my father had passed in the spring. I hadn't told many people. She didn't say anything for a moment. She put the kettle on and sat back down across from me and stayed there quietly for a long time. It was the first time in months I'd felt the weight of it without also feeling alone inside it. On the third day I left the map on the desk. Zoe picked it up when she came in to use the printer. She held it for a beat too long and placed it back exactly where I'd left it, matching the fold to the crease, the way you handle something that has a specific shape you want to preserve. You kept it, she said. Didn't know where else to put it, I said. She almost said something, then she smiled, small and sideways, and turned back to her screen. On the fourth day, Derek showed his first move. Zoe's prepaid lit up with a text from an unknown number. I know you're on the island. She went pale. She sat down and worked through it for me, in a level voice. The kind of voice that comes from having already thought about something enough times to stop being surprised by it. My car is registered in BC. He knows I grew up in Kelowna. Victoria is the logical end of the line if you're moving away from everyone. He doesn't have a specific address yet. He's narrowing it. She took a screenshot. Evidence 1, she called it. I told her to save everything and delete nothing. On the 5th and 6th days, the situation widened in ways that didn't feel random. On Tuesday afternoon, I came back from a walk and found a business card slid under the apartment door. An investigator from a firm based in Langford, just outside the city. No note, no explanation. I brought it home. Zoe photographed it and labeled it, Evidence 2. He doesn't have your exact address, she said, but your name may have come up on a list of Amber's old contacts. He's running through all of them. On the 7th day, I was working from home when I caught myself standing in the doorway of the back room, watching Zoe edit a layout on her laptop. She had her legs folded under her on the chair, and a half-empty mug beside her, and the gray November light coming in from the window. She was completely focused, one hand resting flat on the desk. I turned around. She is Amber's cousin, I told myself. She came here because she was frightened. Don't make it something it isn't. On the 8th night, the heat in the building went out for a few hours. A boiler issue, the building manager said. We sat on the balcony under 2 separate blankets with mugs of tea. Victoria was quiet below us, the harbor lights steady through the still air. The rain had finally stopped. She talked about Derek for the first time. Not the details, just one sentence. He had a way of making me feel like I was always slightly not quite enough, she said. And then working very hard to make sure he was the one who decided what enough would ever look like. I almost put my hand on hers. I didn't. When we went back inside, she paused at the balcony door and looked at the water for another moment before following me in. Thank you for sitting out there with me, she said. On the 9th morning, she was coughing. I left a box of Buckleys on the kitchen counter before my first call. When I came back from an afternoon run, she had left a folded piece of paper balanced on top of it. Thank you. In the corner, she had drawn a small map of streets that didn't go anywhere in particular, just a habit, I thought. The way her hands thought when she wasn't paying attention to them. That evening, she made soup from a recipe her grandmother had taught her. The apartment filled with the smell of chicken and tarragon and lemon. We ate at the kitchen table, and didn't talk about anything that needed to be figured out. After dinner, she said something I kept turning over for the next several days. "Do you ever think some apartments are just waiting?" she said. "Like they have a specific feeling that's only fully there when the right person is living in them?" "This apartment is mine," I said. "Anyone else here is a guest." She looked at her tea. "Then I'll be a very well-behaved guest," she said. On the 10th day, I came home to find she had reorganized the books on the shelf by the window, not alphabetically, not by subject, by color, the warm tones moving into the cool tones the way a painter arranges a palette. She apologized immediately. She said she'd done it during a phone call without realizing. I told her to leave it. It looked like someone lived here on purpose. That night she read on the couch with her feet tucked under her and her mug balanced on the armrest, and something in the apartment shifted slightly. The quiet didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like a room with the right furniture in it. On the 11th morning she came back from picking up coffee looking like she'd seen something that frightened her. She handed me her phone without speaking. She had photographed a dark blue SUV parked across from the building. The driver had been holding a phone up toward the lobby entrance. She had run the plate through an online registry. It came back as a rental under a numbered company she recognized from an old email thread between Derek and a business associate he'd mentioned once. "He found us," she said quietly. "Sometime last night or this morning, his investigator connected your name to mine." "I need the rest of it now," I said. "Not the surface version, all of it." She looked at me for a long time. At noon, she said, "Let me call Priya first." I sat at the kitchen table and waited. I was expecting the rest of the story to be about Derek. I was wrong. At 12:30 the intercom buzzed. I pressed the button. It was Amber. She came up with a carry-on bag and the particular composed expression she used whenever she was walking into a situation she had already rehearsed. She sat down across from us, looked at Zoe, and did not act surprised. "Derek called me twice this week," she said. "His investigator put your name on a list, Lucas." I confirmed it. The room went very quiet. Amber looked at Zoe with something that was almost warm. "You've been in love with him since before we were even engaged. The whole family knew. My mother told you never to say it. You cried in the bathroom on our wedding day. I heard you through the door. You disappeared for almost 20 minutes before the ceremony." She paused. "The map you drew him. The one on his desk right now. You thought he assumed it came from me." Zoe looked at her sister. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "In the spring of 2022, you met Derek at an industry event in Calgary. You spent a few weeks seeing him casually before you decided he wasn't right for you, but you thought he might be right for me. You invited him to a family dinner in Kelowna that August and made sure we spent most of the weekend together. I got engaged to him 14 months later because I wanted to believe I could build something with someone who wasn't the wrong person to want." Amber's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. 2 months ago, when I found out Derek had been unfaithful, I went through his personal laptop while he was in Toronto for a conference. I found his emails. I was copying them when I saw an audio file. It was from a call between him and you from last March. Its file name was ambermarch14.m4a. Amber opened her mouth and closed it. "He records his calls. In that recording you said to him, 'She still thinks about Lucas. Just don't give her room to go back. Keep her close. I'll deal with the rest.'" The room stayed completely still. Amber looked at me. "Derek will be here before 9 o'clock tonight, Lucas. Now you know what you're getting into." I stood up. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Thank you for coming, Amber. You should go now." She picked up her bag. At the door she paused and gave me the small polished smile I remembered from every family occasion. "Good luck," she said. The door clicked shut. The second the latch caught, Zoe opened her laptop and took a USB drive from the inside pocket of her wallet. Her hands were steady in a way that told me she had prepared for this moment more than once. "I didn't want to use these unless I had no choice," she said. "I was going to disappear quietly. She just changed that." Inside the folder were 3 things: a thread of emails between Derek and 2 women over the past 18 months, one a junior employee at his company, one a client he had worked with on a contract basis, the audio file from the call with Amber, and a set of scanned wire transfer receipts from Derek's business email, showing 3 payments to a private investigation firm over the past year and a half, with the firm's name and account numbers visible on each one. He's in the middle of a seed round, Zoe said. $7 million. 2 of his 3 investors have ethics clauses in their term sheets. If I send this to them and to the Technology Industry Association of BC's Conduct Office, that round closes, possibly permanently. She looked at me. I didn't come here to do this. I came here to disappear quietly. He forced my hand. At 8:45, the intercom buzzed. I pressed the button and said yes without asking who it was. Derek Anand was tall and wore an expensive coat and had the kind of unhurried voice that belongs to someone accustomed to making rooms feel like they belong to him. "Lucas Dempsey," he said at the door. "You don't know me. I'm here for my fiancée." I stood in the doorway. Zoe stepped up beside me. "The engagement is over, Derek," she said. "It's been over for 6 weeks." He looked at me. "She entered your apartment without authorization, using a key she took without permission. That's mischief under the criminal code. I can help you resolve that cleanly, or I can make this considerably more complicated for you." He said it the way you'd describe adjusting a setting, neutral, almost helpful. I held up my phone. On the screen was the text message Zoe had sent from her prepaid at 4:30 on the Thursday she arrived. "Lucas, this is Zoe. I'm in Victoria. I need to talk to you. Please call back if you can." She reached out to me before she came up, I said. "I was in a work call and missed it. The key is between her and me. I don't care what you think about it." Then I turned Zoe's laptop around so the screen faced the doorway. "These are emails between you and 2 women over the past 18 months. This is an audio recording of a phone call between you and my ex-wife from last March. These are wire transfer receipts to a private investigation firm you've retained 3 times in the past year and a half. You have 30 seconds to leave this building. After that, the first copy of this folder goes to your investor lead at Clearwater Capital. The second copy goes to the TA Conduct Office." Derek looked at the screen. His face didn't crumple. Men like Derek don't crumple. But his jaw moved once, calculating something, and came up short. He turned without another word. The elevator at the end of the hall arrived and left. Then it was quiet. Zoe leaned against the wall and let out a breath that seemed to have been building for weeks. Her shoulders shook once and stopped. She didn't cry. She looked more tired than I'd ever seen anyone look. "I'm sorry for all of it," she said. "You don't apologize for protecting yourself," I said. "I only need to know one thing. Did you come here because this was the address Derek didn't have, or because I was in it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Both," she said. "But you deserve the honest version of that. Tomorrow morning." At 7 the next morning, she was already at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee, eyes that were swollen and calm at the same time. "I'm going to tell you everything in order," she said. She told me about finding Derek's emails, about the audio file, about staying quiet and building her evidence before she left. She told me about the months before, the slow process of realizing she had chosen Derek not because she loved him, but because she had spent years trying to want someone who wasn't the wrong person to want. She had moved to Toronto for 18 months to put distance between herself and a feeling she believed she could outlast. She didn't outlast it. "About the map," she said. "I drew it for you, not for Amber. I tucked it into a box of kitchen things on moving day without telling anyone. Amber probably assumed she'd packed that box. You probably assumed the same." She looked at her coffee. "I've been in love with you since the winter you came to Christmas at my aunt's house for the first time. You brought a butter tart pie, which is a completely absurd thing to attempt for a first family dinner, and it was delicious, and you kept apologizing for it the entire evening, and I thought, this is exactly the kind of person I want to be around. You were going to marry my cousin in 4 months. I decided right then that I would never say a word." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm not telling you this because I want something from you. I'm telling you because you asked for the honest version. I came here because it was the one address Derek didn't have, and because somewhere underneath that reason, somewhere I wasn't quite brave enough to name out loud, this apartment is the only place I have ever felt like I didn't have to perform being fine." She stood up. Her bag was already by the door. "I'll go. Priya knows a family lawyer here in Victoria. She specializes in harassment and coercive control. I'll call her this morning and handle the rest on my own." I didn't stand up right away. I looked at the map on the desk. At the small notation in the bottom corner, "Hope this helps," in her handwriting. I thought about 2 years of coming home to an apartment that was quiet in a way I had been calling freedom. Sitting there, looking at it clearly for the first time, it was just the same evening repeated over and over, with nobody to notice the difference. I thought about the last 11 days, not about how long she had felt something, about how I had felt with her in the apartment. The answer, when I let myself look at it without tidying it up, was simple, steady, like a room where the heat had finally come on after a long cold stretch. I got up and walked to the door and put my hand on the handle of her bag. "I'm not calling anyone," I said. "You can keep the key. I'll get the locks changed today and get you a proper one." I looked at her. "I don't know what this is going to be. I just came out of a marriage. You just came out of an engagement, and there's a man who may not be entirely done with this yet. We don't owe each other anything big. But I know one thing. If you walk out this door, this apartment goes back to being quiet in a way I don't want anymore. Stay. You don't have to do anything. Just stay." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she put her hand over mine on the handle of the bag. She stayed. She moved into the back room officially. I kept the main bedroom, 2 closed doors and a hallway between us, and coffee at 7 every morning, and the sound of her on a work call through the wall at noon, and the map still on the desk in exactly the place she had left it. On Monday she called the lawyer Priya had recommended. The lawyer reviewed the folder and agreed to take the case at a reduced rate because the evidence was clean and the pattern was textbook. Zoe paid with what she had in cash and arranged a payment plan for the rest. On Tuesday, the application for a protection order went to the BC courts. I changed the locks. I gave her a real key. She tucked the folded map into the frame of the mirror in the hallway, not hiding it, not displaying it exactly, just placing it where it could be seen. In the 3rd week, Derek's lawyer sent a letter threatening a civil defamation claim. Zoe read it at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in her hand, called her lawyer, and said, "Fine, let's go." In the 4th week, Zoe's lawyer filed the counter-application with the full evidence package, the audio file, the emails, the investigator receipts, the photographs of the SUV outside the building. She built a clear picture of a documented pattern of coercive behavior and deception within the relationship. In the 5th week, 2 of Derek's 3 investors requested a pause on the funding round pending review of the conduct concerns. His name began to move through the Vancouver and Victoria tech community the way names do in small professional worlds. Quietly, by implication, through the spaces in conversations where people chose not to say something. In the 6th week, Derek withdrew the defamation claim. The protection order was granted without opposition. He did not appeal. His company announced, in a brief press release, that he was relocating to oversee expansion into the Ontario market. We bought a pizza and ate it on the couch, no ceremony, just the clean, specific feeling of a door finally closing on the outside of something rather than the inside. Amber sent one message weeks later, a single line, "I hope you're both doing well." I didn't respond. Some doors close without a sound, and the silence is its own kind of answer. Zoe drove out to Kelowna and spent a Sunday afternoon on her father's back porch. She didn't argue or explain herself. She just told him about her life, the beginning. He didn't approve. He stopped saying so out loud. Her mother called me once. "Lucas," she said, "I watched Zoe at every free dinner for years and I never once saw her eat a full meal. At your first Christmas she finished everything on her plate and asked for seconds of the pie. I didn't understand what that meant until now. I'm not sure I understand this, but I understand that." Then she said goodbye and hung up. I sat on the balcony for a long time after that call. Small things changed. She cooked on the evenings I was behind on a deadline. I washed the dishes. On Sunday morning, walked along Dallas Road by the water and didn't talk about anything that needed to be resolved, and it turned out that was its own kind of conversation, the kind we had both been going without for years without quite naming the lack. She looked at a mock-up I was building for a client presentation and pointed to a flow diagram I had been staring at for 3 days. "Here," she said, tapping the screen once with one finger. "The user's eye goes here first. You're designing for where you think they should look, not where they actually will." She was right every time. The first kiss happened in the kitchen on a Saturday morning in January. She was on the phone with a client, laughing at something. And when she hung up, I was right there, and I leaned down slowly, and she went very still, and then she kissed me back, the way someone kisses you when they have been patient for a very long time, and have finally decided not to be. In March we moved into a house in Fairfield, a proper neighborhood 2 kilometers from the water, with a garden that needed work and a room at the back with north-facing light she could use as a studio. Her drawing table faced the window. My desk faced the garden, one shared kitchen, one roof. On moving day I found the map at the bottom of the last box. I held it in both hands for a moment. Zoe walked in from the other room. When she saw what I was holding, she smiled, fully, without covering it. "Do you know why I drew it?" she asked. I shook my head. "Because I wanted you to discover the neighborhood on your own and love it. Because I couldn't tell you I'd already walked every block of it, imagining which coffee shop you'd end up at every morning, which bench you'd sit on. I put it in a box and I told myself, if he finds it, that means something. If he doesn't, that means something too." "I found it," I said. "You found it 2 years later in a desk drawer because I came back for it." I put the map on the mantel of the new house under the front window that faces the street. Not folded, not tucked away. Open so anyone who came through the door could see it. That night we sat on the bare living room floor, no furniture yet. She rested her head on my shoulder. The house smelled like fresh paint and the faint cedar of old window frames. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the street a light was still on. "Lucas," she said softly. "Yeah. Can I stay here?" It was the same question as the first night, but the way she said it, I could hear the smile in it. "You already are," I said. "I used to think you knew something was real by how loud it arrived, by how completely it rearranged everything at once. I was wrong about that. Real things arrive the way Zoe arrived. In the rain, at an hour when you're not expecting anyone. They fall asleep in your bed out of exhaustion, and they stay in a way that makes you forget what the apartment sounded like before. Not because they changed it, but because you finally stopped pretending the quiet was enough. I'm not telling this story to put a bow on it. I'm telling it because it took me 3 years in a perfectly good apartment to understand one thing, and I want to say it plainly. We don't notice the person who is loving us carefully because we're too busy trying to make sense of the person who stopped. Amber was loud and complicated and filled every room, and I spent years looking directly at her. Zoe was right there. At every dinner, at every moving box, in every small careful gesture, and I looked straight past her because I was looking in the wrong direction. And Derek was controlling enough, loud enough, that Zoe spent 2 years not trusting her own sense of what she deserved. Sometimes the thing keeping you from the right life isn't a stranger. Sometimes it's the noise you've just gotten used to. Somebody watching this is probably in a room right now with a person like that standing quietly in the corner of it. Someone who draws you maps and doesn't say they drew them. Someone who asks how you are and waits for the actual answer. Someone whose name you already know. 2 questions before I go. If you had come home on a November Thursday evening and found her in your apartment, would you have told her to leave, or would you have said go back to sleep and we'll talk in the morning? And in your own life, is there someone who has been quietly there for longer than you've been paying attention? If this story stayed with you, leave a like so I know you listened all the way through. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week I'm telling the story of a letter I found in the pocket of a jacket I hadn't worn in 4 years. I don't know why I kept the jacket. I do know why she put the letter there. And in the comments, write the name of the person you just thought of. Just their name. I'll read every single one.